Good day, everyone. Today, I will be presenting about literary theories and modern criticism, with a special focus on new criticism and formalism. So, these two theories are important in understanding how we analyze literary based on its language, structure, and internal elements. But before we go deeper, let us first understand what literary theories are. So, literary theories are different approaches on lenses that readers use to analyze and interpret text. They guide us in asking the right questions and in understanding how meaning is constructed. So, the theories we will discuss today are the formalism and new criticism. Both focus on the idea that the text is self contained. This means that everything we need to understand a literary work is already in the text itself. Okay, now let's start with new criticism. So let's know about the history first. So new criticism developed between the 1920s and the 1960s, mainly in the United States and Britain. It was partly influenced by Russian formalism, but it became more structured and academic. So, some key figures in new criticism are Glenn Brooks, John Ramson, T.S. Eliot, and W. K. Wemsett. And we have here a photo of book New Criticism by John Crew. Then, during the mid 20th century, new criticism became the dominant method for teaching literature in English classrooms. Now, let's know about what is new criticism. Okay, new criticism focuses on close reading, which means examining a text very carefully and in great detail. So, similar to formalism, this theory argues that the text has an organic unity. Okay, this means all its parts, images, symbols, structure, tone come together to form one complete meaning. Okay, new critics also reject the use of the author's background or the reader's emotions when interpreting a text. So they believe that the text stands on its own and should be understood through its internal elements only. Okay, and we have here the key concepts or the concepts of new criticism. So first we have here close reading. So which is the detailed and slow examination of the text to uncover layers of meaning. So it is the central method used in new criticism. It means examining the text very carefully, focusing on words, images, structure, patterns, literary devices, tone, symbolism, irony, and even ambiguity. So, close reading treats the text as independent. Everything you need to understand, it is already inside the words on the page. Okay? A text has one best meaning, and this meaning comes from the way that the text is built. You cannot understand a work by studying the author's life, feelings, or historical background. The reader's emotions should not determine the interpretation. So, close reading is used to remove distractions and focus only on the internal elements of the text. Okay, now the second concept, which is the intentional fallacy. Okay, so this means we should not use the author's intention or personal motives as the basis for interpretation. Okay? Intentional fallacy is the error of interpreting a literary work based on the author's intention. What is the author meant, felt, or wanted to say? Okay? The author's intention does not determine the meaning of a text. Meaning should come only from the text itself, not from the author biographies, letters, interviews, or personal background. And relying on the author's intention is considered a fallacy because it can never be fully known or proven. Okay, that is intentional fallacy. Okay, then the third concept is the affective fallacy. Okay, so this states that the reader's emotion should not determine the value or meaning of a literary work. New critics also highlights this importance of paradox, irony, tension, and ambiguity, which they believe contribute to a text unity. Okay, so those are the three concepts of new criticism. Now let's have the example of new criticism. So we have here the Sonnet 18 by Shakespeare. Okay, these um Sonnet 18 is very familiar to us, but let me read it for you so that we can analyze its theory techniques. Okay, so Sonnet 18, Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do the shake darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and ever fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing curse untrimmed. But the infernal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou wast, nor shall death brag thou wonders in this shade, when in internal lines the time the crow rests. So long as man can breath or eyes can see, so long this live and this gives life to thee. So in this example, using this theory of new criticism, we focus on the poem's structure, okay? It's 14 lines and iambic pentameter, okay? We already know how to get this 14 lines in iambic pentameter because we already studied this. So we examine the imagery such as a summer's day, the metaphors and the symbolic meaning of internal beauty. We analyze how these elements work together to create one clear image or one clear message about beauty and immortality. We do not use Shakespeare biography or any historical background. We only rely on what the text provides. Now that we already know what is new criticism, now let's move forward to what is formalism. Okay, so now let's know what is its history. Okay, so formalism began in the early 20th century, specifically around 1910s or 1920s to the 1930s. So it started in Russia and became known as a Russian formalism. So there were two main groups behind this movement, the Moscow Linguistic Circle and Opoyaz. okay, which stands for Society for the Study of Poetic Language. So some well-known figures in formalism include Victor Skovsky, Roman Jakobson, and Boris Yosbam Eichenbaum. Okay, their names are hard to pronounce. Okay, they wanted to study literature in scientific and objective way, focusing on how it is written rather than who wrote it or why it was written. Okay, so now let's know what is formalism. So what is formalism? Formalism is a theory that focuses on the form, structure, and literary devices of a text. According to this approach, the meaning of a literary work is not found in the author's background, the historical context, or the reader's feelings. Instead, meaning comes from the text form, its pattern structure, imagery, symbolism, and use of language. So formalists believes that literature should be studied as a self-contained object. In short, the text itself is the main source of the meaning. Okay, so we have the key concepts here. Here are the key concepts. First, we have literariness. Okay, this refers to what makes a text literary, such as its use of imagery, rhythm, figures of speech, and narrative techniques. So, literariness is one of the central concepts of formalism. It refers to the qualities of language and technique that make a text a work of literature rather than ordinary communication. So, in short, literariness was the features that make literature feel like literature. So, the term comes from Russian formalists, especially Roman Jakobson, Viktor Shklovsky. Okay, they argue that what makes literature special is not the author, okay, not the message, not the historical context, but the language itself, how it is arranged, patterned, and crafted. Okay, and then the second concept is defamiliarization. Again, defamiliarization. This is when the writer makes ordinary things appear strange or new in order to force readers to see them in a fresh way. Okay? It is a technique that slows down our perception so we can appreciate the richness of language. Okay? The familiarization means presenting ordinary things in unusual, strange, or unexpected ways so that readers see them freshly as it for the first time. No, we they believe, okay, the scholars believe that in our daily life, we stop noticing things because they become normal or automatic. So formalism also looks closely at structural elements like plot, point of view, symbols, and patterns of such a rhyme, letter. So now let's have an example of formalism. So we have here the stopping by woods on a snowy evening by Robert Frost's poem. So it is very famous, it is very popular poem by Robert Frost, and I believe we already familiar with that. But now let's have this as for example. So again, let me read it for you so that we can list this together. So stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think? I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Okay, so that is the Robert Frost poem titled Stopping by Woods in a Snowy Evening. So, to understand how formalism works, let us take a simple example. The pattern of the poem is AABA, BBCB, and CCDC, and so on. Because it's because of the rhyme. So first sentence or first line in stanza is no. So next is another rhyme. So it's called AABA, and CCDC. Okay. So we also notice the repetitions such as and miles to go before I sleep. Okay, which create a pattern of finality and reflection. So we also observe the imagery, which is the woods, the snow, the darkness, and how these images build mood and meaning. Okay, and in this method, we do not talk about Frost's personal life or the time period he lived in. We falsely or we only focus on what appears in the text itself only. Okay, so that is the formalism. Okay, now that we have discussed the main ideas behind formalism and new criticism, let us move a little deeper to understand how these theories influence the way we read and interpret literature. Okay, so first question, why these theories matter? Oh, so formalism and new criticism remain important today because they teach us discipline in reading. They remind us that before looking for deep emotional meaning or historical context, we must first understand what the text is doing on that page. Okay, this means paying attention to details, how a poem sounds, how a story is structured, how language creates meaning, and these skills are the foundation of serious literary study. Okay, and the next question, how they changed literary studies. So both theories changed the way literature was thought. Okay, before formalism and new criticism, people often relied on the author's biography or historical events to interpret a text. But these theories shifted the focus back to the work itself, encouraging close reading, careful analysis, and appreciation of literary craft. So this shift still influences classrooms today. When teacher asks us to analyze imagery, symbolism, irony, or structure, we are actually practicing this theory. Oh, we didn't really know that we're already practicing this theory. Hmm. Next question. What is the strengths and weaknesses? Or it's not the question, so let's have the strengths and weaknesses. So, like any theory, they have strengths and weaknesses. Okay, they teach discipline and close reading. They celebrate the beauty of literary form, and then they encourage objective, text-based analysis. Um, but then their weakness is they sometimes ignore social issues. Okay, they do not include the reader's experience. They can be limiting when interpreting modern works that depend heavily on context. But despite this limitation, these theories remain foundational in the study of literature. So that is the important to remember that no single literary theory can explain everything. So the new criticism and formalism gives us tools that help us see structure, patterns, tensions, and unity. So these tools are still useful today and form the basis for many modern approaches to reading. As students, learning these theories helps us become more analytical, more observant, and more sensitive. So, how writers use language to shape meaning. Okay, so that concludes our lesson for today. So, you already know what is new criticism and formalism. Hope you gain understanding and learning. And now you may answer our quiz. So thank you for listening and keep safe, everyone.